You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
This is KUNM. I'm Daniel Montano. It is primary election night across New Mexico, and we're bringing you race coverage throughout the evening here on All Things Considered and online at KUNM.org. Joining me live to discuss some of what New Mexico voters are thinking about as they head to the polls is Source New Mexico reporter Austin Fisher. Hi, Austin. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. So yesterday, you rode the New Mexico Rail Runner end to end from Santa Fe to Belen, and you were talking to voters ahead of today's primary election. What stood out in those conversations?
Well, what really everyone told me was that they're pretty frustrated with their choices this year. I spoke with people of various political backgrounds and various ages, and all of them said they really wish they had more choices in the presidential election. The very first person I spoke with was Lauren Hartzell, a 19-year-old biology and chemistry student at the University of New Mexico and a registered independent. When I met her, she was taking the rail runner down to survey at the National Wildlife Refuge to do some research. And this will be her first presidential election. Her first time voting was 2 years ago. She said she actually forgot about the primary, and she wasn't even sure if she could vote in the primary. And she said, she knows what she's signing up for with the big names. And she said she's annoyed with the two choices. She told me it's annoying to see the same two people who we were already upset with having them being the only two choices in the last election. She told me, quote, "I don't know if it's just because I'm a young person myself, but I'm really annoyed with seeing just old people in office. I wish there were more options out there." So I heard this from a number of other voters on the rail runner. And yeah, it's just I think it applies not just to the presidential election, but, we did some reporting today about how many of the state races for our legislature also have very few or no choices.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure that's a common sentiment. So moving on, New Mexico is among some of the last primaries in the country this year, and both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are already the presumptive nominees for their parties. How are voters that you spoke with feeling about that? I'm sure very similar to what she told you on the train, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I also spoke with Starla Martinez, who is a student and a mother. When we met, she was actually headed back south to her home in Santa Fe after a nervous job interview, or her home in Albuquerque after a nervous job interview in Santa Fe. And she told me the same thing. She said she's a person of color and she's tired of seeing old white men in office. She told me they don't represent all of us. They don't really care about what all of us think and say. She's unhappy with the influence of money in politics and the prominence of lobbyists in politics. And she says she feels a sense of political exhaustion that she shares with her friends and family who are stark Democrats, stark Republicans, telling her all the choices are bad. She said she wishes there would be some sort of requirement that politicians get certified to be able to run. She told me it seems like nobody's really in touch with what's happening with real people. She said this feeling applies to presidential candidates and local elected officials. And she feels like they're not listening to their constituents over what they want to do once they get in office. And she feels like we need to break away from a two-party system.
Was anybody that you spoke with excited to vote for either Donald Trump or President Biden?
No. And I know that it's a small sample size, but among the four people I spoke with on the train and another group of voters I spoke with on Saturday in Albuquerque, I mean, they're just kind of holding their noses and voting for one of the two candidates. But really, I mean, I also spoke with another student, a 19-year-old student named Lily Rich. She's doing atmospheric physics research at the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, called New Mexico Tech, as we know it. She's a registered independent, but she said she probably won't vote in the primary because she just wants different candidates, and if she was forced to vote, she would vote for Trump. But she's really looking for more information out there, especially for young voters like her.
Right. Well, I'm Austin Fisher, reporter with Source New Mexico. Thanks so much for coming on to share some voters' perspectives tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
Absolutely. You're listening to KUNM News on this primary election day in New Mexico. Stay with us for more election coverage and head to KUNM.org after the polls close tonight for live results as they come in.
Support comes from the New